WIBTAH for divorcing my wife because she can't stop blaming me for the freak crash that killed her dad and brother. Even though I almost died too. I'm 33M, married to my wife, 35F, for 7 years. Before everything, we were that nauseatingly solid couple. Inside jokes, shared playlists, Sunday omelets, the whole montage. My wife was close to her dad in a way that made me jealous in the best possible sense. She called him every day, sometimes twice, just to chat about nothing. Her little brother, 21 when he died, she was 14 when he was born, was practically her first baby. When we started dating, her dad used to clasp my shoulder and say, "Take care of my girl, son." I always answered, "I got her," and I meant it. A couple of years ago, we had a guys' night. Me, my father-in-law, and my brother-in-law. It was supposed to be burgers, a movie, harmless trash talk. Instead, the universe pulled a trapdoor. A driver lost control and plowed into us. My BIL died on impact. My FIL made it to the hospital and held on for 2 days before he didn't. I broke my arm and leg and nearly bled out. Physically, I recovered. On paper, anyway. In my head, I'm still in that car. The day it happened is stuck to me like a second skin. I remember the mood from dinner. My FIL teasing my BIL for ordering a milkshake and then stealing half of it anyway. I remember the exact laugh he gave when I called him sneaky. I remember the traffic light being green and the song on the radio, some mid-2000s alt track I hadn't heard in years, and then the scream of metal. The crash wasn't cinematic, it was blunt and ugly. A flash of white, the world folding in, then glass like hail. Something slammed my chest. I tried to turn to my left. My father-in-law's lips were moving, but I couldn't hear him. There was blood at the corner of his mouth, bright and too much. The back seat looked wrong. My brother-in-law's head was tilted in a way I can't unsee. A stranger's voice kept saying, "Don't move. Keep your eyes open." The sirens were a lifetime away and somehow immediate. At the hospital, everything became fluorescent and forms and machines. My wife arrived and found me first, tubes in my arms, leg in a temporary cast. She asked about her dad and her brother, and I didn't have the words. One of the nurses tried to guide her to a family room. My wife yanked her arm away and went hunting for her father. She found him in the ICU, thought he squeezed her hand, later said she must have imagined it. I wasn't there when they told her about her brother. I only know she made a sound that didn't belong to this earth. The funeral was a double blow, one held after a 2-day vigil and one immediate. I hobbled through both on painkillers and autopilot, crying and also somehow not crying. Everyone kept telling me I was lucky to be alive. I did not feel lucky. Afterward, grief became our fourth roommate. For a while, my wife and I grieved together. She curled up against my good shoulder at night and shook silently. I'd wake up sweating from dreams where I was still in the car, or where I wasn't there at all and could have changed the route, the time, something. She'd whisper, "It wasn't your fault." Then one day, there's no clean break to point at. She stopped whispering that and started saying the opposite. It started small. We were in the kitchen and I mentioned the mechanic calling about the totaled car, and she said, "If you hadn't wanted to go out, none of this would have happened." I froze. She swallowed the words back, sort of apologized. But then it came again. "Why didn't you drive a different way? Why didn't you see him coming? Why were you in the car at all?" Then the shifts. Days where she was my wife, making me tea, sending me memes, touching the scar on my wrist like it was a relic. Other days, she couldn't stand to look at me. She'd flinch when I walked into the room, pace the hallway, shut doors harder than they needed to be shut. The shouting days were worst. "You should have protected them. You promised my dad you'd take care of me. This is how you did it." And then the quiet days after, where she'd avoid my eyes and sleep on the couch. I started therapy. She refused, both couples and individual. "I'm not the one who needs fixing," she said. I told her therapy isn't about fixing. I said we could go to honor her dad, for our marriage, for her. She shook her head and said, "Talking won't bring them back." I loved her dad. My own father was a ghost, so her dad became the blueprint for what a father could be. I loved her brother like the little brother I didn't grow up with. I still see them. I see my FIL's bleeding mouth, the torn sleeve, his hand in mine. I see my BIL's hoodie bunched up behind his neck. Sometimes I call their phones just to hear the voicemail greeting. I see that car every single time I close my eyes. I don't think my wife is a bad person. She's not a villain. She's drowning. She was such a daddy's girl, the kind that sends her dad pictures of her lunch. And her brother was her first real practice at caring for someone helpless. She used to say, "He made me a big sister and a softer person." I think, maybe, in her mind, grief is a beast and it needs a target. The universe is too big to punch in the face, so she chose me. I've tried every angle. On days when she's herself, we talk about how anger is normal, how grief doesn't have stages so much as it has weather. On days when she's sharp and cruel, I go quiet, let it pass. I've told her, I was there too. I nearly died too. She says, "But you didn't." Therapy helps me survive, but it's like bailing out a boat that someone keeps drilling holes in. I leave a session feeling steadier, and then I come home and she screams, "Why didn't you check the other lane?" And I'm back in the wreck. I promised her father I'd take care of his girl. It's the sentence that keeps me in this house. But taking care of her, Does that include being the punching bag for her pain forever? Is that care, or is it martyrdom with a nicer name? And am I taking care of myself at all? Because most days, I feel like I'm living in a shrine where I'm the only candle left to burn. Our families are split. Her mother lives in a fog of her own grief and mostly stares through me. Her aunt told me quietly that my wife needs help she won't accept, and that leaving might be the only thing that shocks her into getting it. My sister thinks I'm being emotionally abused and should have left already. My best friend says grief makes people feral and that if there's any part of me left that can wait, I should wait. At church, people hug us too long and say too many words. Online grief forums tell me to set boundaries, which sounds like trying to draw chalk lines in a hurricane. At work, I became the guy who lived. People lowered their voices when I walked into the break room for months. My manager asked if I wanted time off. I said no and took extra projects instead because spreadsheets don't accuse you. A few months ago, on a caring day, my wife apologized. She cried into my shirt and said, "I know it wasn't your fault. I just can't stop seeing them when I look at you." That broke me more than the yelling, because I can't argue with the truth of it. I can't ask her not to see what I see too. So here I am. I still love my wife. I would choose her every day in a world where this never happened. But in this one, I don't know if staying is love or slow-motion self-destruction. I don't want to desert her in the apocalypse of her grief. I also don't want to spend the rest of my life as a stand-in for death. WIBTAH if I left? Not slam the door left, but careful, sorrowful left. Papers filed, keys returned, a letter that says, "I love you, and I can't be your scapegoat anymore." Is there a world where leaving is the kindest thing, where she might heal without staring at the wreckage that survived? Or am I rationalizing abandonment because I'm tired and bruised? So, IDA if I get a divorce because my wife won't stop blaming me for her dad and brother's deaths? Update. I didn't plan to update this quickly, but the dam finally broke. After I posted, I wrote my wife a letter. 2 pages, no defenses, just truth. I told her I love her, that I'm haunted too, that I will not accept being blamed anymore, and that I'm preparing to move out unless she agrees to therapy, individual and couples. I gave her a week to think. No ultimatums screamed in doorways, just a deadline on paper, so we weren't floating. The first 2 days she avoided me. On day 3 she came into the bedroom holding the letter. She started calm, and then her voice climbed. "You're threatening me with abandonment." I said, "I'm drawing a boundary because I'm drowning." We spiraled. She shouted that I wanted to erase her family by refusing to talk about them the way she needs. I said I want to talk about them as people we loved, not as a cudgel. At one point she said, "If you died instead of them, I wouldn't have to look at you and remember." Then she slapped her own mouth, horrified, and sobbed like she was breaking open. I packed a bag and told her I'd stay with my friend for a week to cool down. That night, her aunt texted me. She called me. She's scared. The next morning, my wife sent a message. "I'll go. I'll try therapy. I don't promise to be perfect. I promise to show up." She asked me to come home for the first session so we could schedule together. I did. We met with a grief counselor. She insisted on one who specializes in traumatic loss. The counselor didn't wave a wand, but she gave us a room where accusations weren't allowed to land and fester. My wife admitted she's tied anger to safety. If she blames me, she feels like she's making sense of chaos. I admitted I'm scared to breathe wrong. We set rules. No blaming language, timeouts when we feel the spiral, weekly individual sessions, bi-weekly couples. If, big if, the rules break repeatedly, we separate with dignity. It's day 6 of the new plan. My wife hasn't blamed me this week. She's still sad, still tender. Yesterday, she touched the scar on my wrist and said, "I'm sorry you were there. It was small and it was huge. I'm not naive. It took 2 years to get here, and the path forward will not be a straight line. I still have my bag half packed in the closet. But for now, I'm choosing the version of love that tries one more time, with boundaries, with help, with the option to leave if trying turns back into bleeding."